Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving right into a topic that honestly touches every single one of us, whether we're students, teachers, parents, or just, lifelong learners. We are going to completely reframe what educational assessment really means, and we're looking way, way beyond the traditional gradebook. Now, be honest for a second. What actually comes to mind when you hear the word assessment? For most of us, it immediately triggers this universal dread of a terrifying final exam, or maybe that anxiety of waiting for a report card that feels like, well, a permanent judgment on our abilities. And let's validate that feeling, because historically, that's exactly how it felt. But right now, we're going to pivot. We're going to see how modern assessment is actually designed to be a continuous, supportive GPS for learning. It's not a finish line, it's the navigation system. Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. First, we'll see why assessment is more than just grades. Then, we'll cover the rules for effective assessment, explore the for, as, and of framework, identify who actually relies on this data, and wrap up with some incredible new trends in the classroom. Let's get into it. Starting off with Section 1, more than just grades. It's time to absolutely shatter the myth that testing is just about slapping a letter grade on a piece of paper and moving on to the next chapter. Modern education experts view assessment as a dynamic, systematic flow. Just take a look at this cycle. We collect evidence, we interpret it, we use it, and finally we improve instruction. Assessment is literally an integral component of the teaching and learning process itself. It guides instructional decisions in real time, it monitors a learner's progress, and it provides that vital feedback loop needed for continuous improvement. It's an active loop, guys, not a static number. To anchor this in some expert research, let's turn to Nitko and Brookhart. They define it as obtaining information to make educational decisions. I want you to really notice that word, decisions. It's all about using evidence to figure out what a student needs next, what parts of the curriculum are actually working, and even how broader educational policies should be shaped. As another researcher, Popham, emphasized back in 2017, this is all about evidence-based decision-making aimed at improving student achievement, rather than simply, ranking students against each other. Moving right along to Section 2, Rules for Effective Assessment. So if it's not just a big final exam at the end of the year, how do we make sure an assessment is actually doing its job fairly and effectively? Well, to ensure a test is fair, there's a sheer variety of principles required. Just notice the 7 basic principles laid out here. We've got validity, reliability, fairness, practicality, authenticity, continuous assessment, and alignment. Think about fairness, for instance. An assessment absolutely must provide equal opportunities for all learners, regardless of their background, culture, or any disabilities. Or take practicality. Is the test actually feasible considering the time and resources a teacher has? Every single one of these 7 principles acts as a crucial quality control check on how we measure learning. Let's zoom in on the 2 most heavily debated principles for a second. It is so crucial to distinguish between an assessment being accurate and being consistent, which are basically the twin pillars of quality testing. Validity means the test actually measures what it's supposed to. For example, if you want to assess oral communication skills, you need to use a speaking test, right? Not a handwriting test. Reliability, on the other hand, means the results are consistent. If a student takes the test, they should get a similar score regardless of who is grading it or when it's administered. You absolutely need both of these to have a meaningful assessment. Another really critical rule here is alignment. Building on Biggs and Tang's research from 2011, we have to ensure the way we teach aligns perfectly with how we measure learning and what the intended outcomes actually are. This creates what's known as constructive alignment. Imagine a teacher instructing students on how to ride a bicycle by having them read a book, but then testing them by putting them on a real bike on a tightrope. That's a massive misalignment. The learning outcomes, the instructional activities, and the assessment must all mirror each other perfectly for deep student learning to occur. Which brings us to Section 3, for, as, and of. Let's see how these principles build into a pretty powerful triad that categorizes exactly why we assess in the modern classroom. Following Black and Williams' foundational work in 1998, educational assessment is categorized into 3 distinct buckets based on its core purpose. First up, we have assessment for learning. This is formative. It happens during instruction to help identify misconceptions and, improve teaching right on the fly. Examples include exit tickets or just a quick class discussion. Then, on the far right, we have assessment of learning. This is summative. It happens at the end of instruction to measure achievement and assign grades. Think midterm exams or big standardized tests. But the absolute most transformative idea here is the one right in the middle, championed by researcher Lorna Earle in 2013, assessment as learning. This emphasizes the learner's active role. By having students engage in self-monitoring, reflection, and peer assessment, we turn them into independent, reflective learners. They aren't just passively taking a test. They're actively monitoring their own growth through learning journals and portfolio reflections. They are literally thinking about how they think, which is a concept called metacognitive learning. It's a real game changer. So the crucial shift here is in the timing and the primary user across these three buckets. Notice how assessment for learning is used by teachers and students during instruction to improve learning. Assessment as learning is used primarily by the student themselves to develop self-regulation while they are learning. And assessment of learning is used at the end by teachers, schools, and parents to measure mastery. When we use all three of these together, we support truly meaningful learning. Now let's jump to Section 4, Who needs this data? Which actually brings up an excellent question. Who really cares about all this testing data? Now, you might think assessment is just this private conversation between a teacher and a student, but the reality is so much broader. This data acts as a vital feedback loop for a massive network. Students use it to set goals, teachers use it to modify teaching strategies, parents rely on it to support learning at home, school administrators need it to figure out how to allocate resources and plan interventions. Curriculum developers use it to see if their materials actually work. Policymakers at the government level use it for national educational reforms. And ultimately, employers and higher ed institutions use it to determine professional competencies and admission decisions. It is quite literally the lifeblood of the entire educational ecosystem. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, New Trends in Assessment. Let's look at how the evolution of these concepts is actively reshaping modern classrooms right now. We are witnessing a massive shift away from rigid, time-based traditional exams. For decades, the standard was a quiet room, a ticking clock, and a paper and pencil test. Sound familiar? Today, we are moving rapidly toward flexible, authentic, and competency-based models. We recognize that students learn in completely different ways, so naturally, they should be able to demonstrate their learning through varied forms of evidence, not just filling in tiny bubbles on a Scantron sheet. There are some amazing new tools and trends making this flexibility possible. Look at authentic assessment. Students are demonstrating knowledge through real-world projects and simulations rather than just rote memorization. We're also seeing technology-enhanced assessment using AI-assisted feedback and digital portfolios. We have inclusive assessment practices designed specifically to accommodate diverse and multilingual learners. And perhaps most exciting to me are CATs, or classroom assessment techniques. These are short, low-stakes activities like a minute paper or an exit slip that teachers use regularly to monitor learning in real time, catching confusion before the student ever even leaves the room. I want to leave you with this final thought. Just look at how far we've come from simply assigning a letter grade. It challenges us to ask, are we assessing merely to prove that learning happened in the past, or are we assessing to ensure that learning never stops in the future? When we view assessment not as a terrifying finish line, but as the very engine of lifelong learning, we unlock the true potential of every single learner. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.